Okay, so hands down, this is the scariest tour I've ever been on.
I'm so scared.
This one's freaked me out.
Nah, piece of cake, man.
Especially when we were inside that house.
We didn't see any dead bodies or anything.
That was like the creepiest house I've ever been in.
Yeah, the house was built on a mass grave. That's pretty creepy.
All across this land are beautiful sights to behold, history to uncover, and places to explore. Colorado Martini has been lucky enough to travel across the countryside to see some of these wondrous sights. This is Colorado Martini on the road. Denver Botanical Gardens are the largest and prettiest gardens I have ever had the pleasure to visit. During the day, the garden's tranquil beauty surpasses all others. Maybe because the dirt has compost like no other garden does. Because this is the site of the long-forgotten Mount Calvary Cemetery. And just like its next-door neighbor, Cheesman Park, several bodies are still buried under the gardens. It is estimated between Cheesman Park, the Denver Botanical Gardens, and the surrounding areas, over 2,000 bodies still reside under the ground. Mount Calvary Cemetery was the Roman Catholic section of Prospect Hill Cemetery, which opened in 1858. Prospect Hill Cemetery had several sections leased out to fraternal organizations and religious groups, including the Roman Catholic Diocese. But by the 1880s, the cemetery fell into disrepair. The groups responsible for maintaining their sections started neglecting them. And in 1890, the city of Denver decided to convert the area into a city park. The families of the deceased were only given 90 days to remove the bodies. Due to the large number of graves in the Roman Catholic section off to the east, 40 acres were sold to the Archdiocese, and that acreage was named Mount Calvary Cemetery. The Archdiocese started moving bodies to a different Catholic cemetery in Wheat Ridge. But in 1950, the remaining 8,600 bodies in a very neglected cemetery were moved to the Wheat Ridge Cemetery. And the Archdiocese then sold the property back to the city of Denver. In 1951, the Denver Botanical Gardens took over that property and opened its doors, and now resides on 26 of those 40 acres. And since then, employees of the Denver Botanical Gardens have reported paranormal activity all over the gardens. So looking out at some of the neighborhoods that are just outside are all buried on the graveyard. Whenever there is any kind of digging at the Botanical Gardens, it is a high percentage bet that some part of the old cemetery is found, such as coffin handles, fragments of wood, scraps of burial materials, and brass plaques. But they also find human remains. Most recently, a new parking structure was built on York Street, and several coffins were found. Unfortunately, many of the bodies and remains that are found were paupers or criminals, and there's no way of knowing if they have relatives that still exist. But of all the scary places within the gardens, nothing is more frightening than the Waring house. This house was built back in the 20s, smack dab on top of the old graveyard. Shortly after it was built, it was noticed that its foundation had begun to shift. The worst cracking in the building seemed to happen around the library and the lobby and the drawing room. The owners of the mansion spent a lot of money shoring up the foundation. Several decades later, the Waring family that lived in the mansion next door bought this house and donated it to the Botanical Gardens. But in the 70s, many pits opened up and depressions appeared. So the gardens decided to do boreholes into the dirt and take dirt samples so they could figure out what was going on. What they found was disturbed dirt and pieces of coffins, and at least 4 feet of avoided space. And what they concluded was the Waring house was built on top of numerous coffins, and when they disintegrated, it was causing the house to sink. And with all the watering happening at the gardens, everything was deteriorating even faster. And still to this day, they are not sure how many coffins exist under the mansion, and the mansion continues to subside and might one day become so unstable that it collapses itself. The staff and the visitors to the gardens have many scary stories, and especially about the Waring house. So many stories that they keep a book where visitors can write down their experiences. And one of the most chilling stories that I know about the gardens is that just outside the Waring house is known to be a mass grave of those who were struck by illness during a pandemic in the Denver area. So if you find yourself in the Denver area in the month of October, we highly suggest that you take one of their evening haunted tours of the gardens. Make sure to catch all our videos on the beautiful Rocky Mountain state of Colorado.